just be who you're meant to be on this world and don't be afraid to take up space. Just do the thing. Whatever creative spark is in you, chase after it. And who knows what it'll look like. I think if I hadn't started a blog, I don't imagine I'd be where I am now doing the work that I'm doing. So just try whatever that looks like. Yeah. Claim your space.
Welcome to Lauren's Best. Today we're chatting with Alanna Rusnak about juggling motherhood and writing, all while creating an award-winning publishing company, a podcast, and even a magazine. Alanna reveals how she got started and stayed on track with her first novel. From battling with household chaos to find those precious writing moments, to now having a dedicated space to write and headquarters her entrepreneurial vision, she talks about how her strategies have evolved while honing her discipline as a creative. I think it's so interesting how in your podcast, you talk about, to some extent, it's personal, but and it reflects your creative journey as an author. And then it also reflects this sense of stewardship, I suppose, towards your audience as because you speak to developing writers and to authors with a dream or soon to be authors with a dream, how you kind of hold all of this together in your podcast. So I mean, I'm just curious. I'm curious how your kids have reacted to you podcasting. But before we get into that, what is it like? How is that balancing the perspectives on the different elements of your creative journey, so to speak, and of how you show up and serve in the world? In the podcast, I mean.
In the podcast.
Yeah. I know it's a big question, regardless of what context it's in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the podcast really started as another platform and way for me to support the authors that I'm working with. So I thought I'll throw up these random interviews with authors as we're either gearing up to launch their book or right after the book has launched, just kind of as part of the overall marketing plan. And I found that conversation space opened up a lot of new perspective for me as their publisher or as their mentor to learn different things about them as a person, because somehow in the kind of face-to-face podcast conversation, people seem a little looser and maybe less guarded for whatever reason. I don't know what it is about that conversation space, but I felt like I really kind of got into the guts of who these authors were. So that was really exciting. And selfishly, I saw the analytics on my website just skyrocket because suddenly I was putting up content that somewhere someone was consuming. I still haven't cracked the, where are people listening and how do I track that? But I can see that there's activity. So I thought, well, that's really great. What if I also utilize this platform for my own creative journey? And maybe that will inspire a different audience than author interviews, because I think often if you promote, I'm doing author interviews, you're speaking to a really specific demographic of people who are going to eat that up. There's going to be a little group that really love that, but there's a whole other group that are like, this is not for me, or I'm not into the genre of this particular author. I'm not here for that kind of conversation. But I found that when I said, you know what, I'm going to start sharing about my own journey because I'm trying to write a book too, and I need to make space for myself. So here's one way to do it. I'm going to get on here and I'm just going to talk to the ether and share my journey. And I find that has resonated with people and helped keep me accountable to my own creative journey because I feel like, well, now I have something I have to report to this little audience, and not like it's a little audience, but growing. So that's exciting and encouraging and affirming that people are actually engaging in the chaos of my creative space. So I almost look at it as a part of my creative discipline. As far as sharing my own, like that little series that I have going on the side of the podcast.
How does that compare to writing your first novel? And when you say the words creative discipline, I get this sense of like momentum, like that has existed, it will exist. And so what did that look like before for your first novel?
Well, my first novel, I was a blogger. So I kind of, as a child, I wrote stories, and then that's what I really excelled at in school was creative writing. Even essay writing I enjoyed. And then I got married the week after high school graduation. So I was 18 years old, got married. My whole goal in life was I'm going to be a mom. And so I became a mom I was 21 when I had my firstborn, and that consumed my whole life. So I wasn't feeding that kind of creative self that I was as a child. That just kind of got set aside while I pursue this. Oh, I'm a mom. And I was very proud of meeting that goal. Like I'm just a mom, and I say just, and that's not fair. But I was a child raising children. And so everything else was set aside until what happened? I feel like it was Facebook's fault. For me, Facebook started when my children were very young, and I started playing with, do you remember when you used to do status updates?
Yeah, totally. It would say, what are you doing right now?
Yeah.
Or it would even say your name is. And I remember some of the updates wouldn't be complete sentences because I would be finishing the sentence.
Yeah.
Lauren is. Yeah.
Yes. So that, I feel embarrassed saying it, but that unlocked something in me because I started having fun with that and like sharing these really dumb, like if there was a way to go back and look at it, I'm sure I would be so embarrassed, so horrified. But people engaged with these awful things that I was posting. Like I would post song lyrics or like twist an old piece of poetry to mirror what I was feeling that day. Like I thought I was being very romantic, and I just wanted to be interesting. And then there was this trend that started, I think it was like 10 random facts about you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I jumped on that, shared these 10 facts and tried to be super interesting and profound. And, and people were like, you should start a blog. And because I'm a people pleaser, I started a blog and started writing my experience as a mother. So it was like a mommy blog, but more like slice of life. Like, let me share what my kids did today. And that gained some traction and started boosting my confidence in my voice. And it was a place that I could kind of play and explore who am I as a writer, like as a mother writer. And I think, I don't know how many years I was blogging before I decided now's the time I'm going to write a book. So blogging it might take a couple hours of the week. So I could do it during nap time or, well, the kids are in the sandbox. So I'm going to sit on the deck and I'm going to type out a little blog. But when I finally decided to write a book, I think, so I have 3 kids. I think my youngest was maybe 6 years old when I decided it is time. And so I signed up for NaNoWriMo. which is National Novel Writing Month, which happens every November. And it's a like global challenge to write the first draft of a novel in a month. So I declared this goal to my family. I took over a room in our house that had a door that was just being used to collect junk. So I cleared it out, put in a desk, and said, every day I'm going to go in here and shut the door for whatever chunk of time I need. And if you need anything, you go to your dad. I'm off the clock right now. So that discipline that was created in that month-long journey of writing a draft really kind of set me up for now, years later, doing the work that I'm doing, which also includes my own writing.
So valuable. I know I personally can find it really difficult to shut that door and take that time. Unless I really commit to the time and space, I can be like, oh, I'll go do it. Oh, a little later, I'm just gonna finish this thing up. Oh, I guess we'll have lunch first, right?
Yeah.
I guess so were there ways that you helped? I mean, you had this accountability of NaNoWriMo, which that in and of itself, it means it's a push. I know whenever I do something that's a month-long challenge, I suddenly have the capacity to be a different person for that month. But were you doing that at the same time every day? Or did you have a ritual around that helped, or maybe things you told yourself that helped you stay on track during that early stage of first starting to dig into that?
Yeah, I think I did it after dinner. So like we'd have supper, and then I would make a cup of tea, and I probably put the kids in front of the TV. Like I don't really remember, and was just like, I need 2 hours or an hour and a half or whatever it was, and don't bother me unless you're bleeding was basically the message. And so my youngest was 6 years old, which means my oldest was 12, maybe. Old enough that he could help support the other kids. And my husband was there. He was also on doing some shift work. So he was kind of like working week on, week off. So some weeks he was there, some weeks he was away at work, and I was like single parent. So that's another interesting thing to navigate, but that's a different conversation. Yeah, I was just really firm on this has to happen. And if I couldn't get my word count that I needed done in that window that I had given the kids, I would have to break, put the little ones to bed, and then come back and finish the word count. And at the same time, I had started a Twitter account, and I had been posting my progress on there, and found that was helpful too, because I was being really public about what I was doing so that I couldn't allow myself to fail. And at that point, failure only meant I wouldn't follow through. It didn't mean like I'd actually published a book at the end. That wasn't even on my radar. It was just, if you can write a whole draft of a book, you've really accomplished something. And that was something I needed it for whatever reason. It was something I really valued.
And when you got to the end of that month, what was it like to have accomplished that? Or did you get to the end of the draft by the end of the month?
Yeah. So I met the goal of 50,000 words. So that's not a finished book. That's a really, really messy draft. But I was super excited about what I'd written and kind of the characters I'd discovered and the story I'd discovered. So that kind of lit me up to keep going, because I'd already created this discipline and space. And after a month, my kids were kind of trained to like, Mom's going to go work on her writing. So she's useless for this time. She's not for us. So yeah, that the month-long discipline really helped create a bit of a habit mindset that allowed me to keep working on that story.
So did that draft become your debut novel that you
It did.
published?
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So I feel like it was 2014 when I did NaNoWriMo. And then my book came out in 2017. So I took a lot of time to rewrite, to polish, to go through beta readers, and did all the things that Google told me that I needed to do, and entered into the querying stage of trying to find an agent, cold calling publishers, like all the things, again, that you're supposed to do. And that was not a good experience for me.
Is that what then led you to start your publishing company, to try to provide a better version of that experience?
Yeah. So my book was literary fiction, and everyone that I queried to, if I got a response, it was literary fiction is impossible to sell. It's impossible to market unless you're a big name with a big platform. And I'm just over here. Well, I have a little blog. So no one would take a chance on me. And I was way too passionate about this years of work that I'd done on this book. And it was like, well, there's no way that you're not going to stop me. So watch me. So I did register as a Canadian publisher with the Canadian government. And if you're in Canada, that's really easy to do. And I self-published my first novel. And that was a really, really rewarding experience for me. And I don't look back on that with any regret or wish that that dream agent had taken me out. Like, of course, we can't know what would have happened, but having to kind of dive in and really just grab the bull by the horns and do it on my own was such an opportunity for learning and growth. And the pride that I have in the finished product now, I think, is probably worth more than had someone else picked it up for me. Yeah. So I think it all started because of Facebook.
I've never heard a self-published author, even if they ended up going the traditional publishing route with future deals, I've never heard anyone say they regretted self-publishing instead of traditional publishing for their early work. So your family had seen this transformation starting with Facebook. Well, they might not have known it started with Facebook. They're like, it started with mom doing stuff after dinner, which also, by the way, I think is tremendously valuable insight for people who are parents, who are already creatives or who want to be creatives. Because I noticed that many writers, creative people in general, I think, but especially writers, talk about morning routines and, morning pages, or if it's not that, like, what else can you do in your morning routine and how do you start, your workday and start off your creative process in the morning, which, like, don't get me wrong, there's value there. And I enjoy some good morning productivity as much as the next person. But I think for people who are parents, and especially parents with young children, that can feel a little unattainable, or even if it's attainable, like, it can feel like a big stretch to attain. It can feel like a really sort of complicated thing to navigate. And I think hearing from someone who found something that worked and who went ahead and did it, I know I tend to say that I have nothing left by the end of the day, but if it was NaNoWriMo, maybe I would have something left by the end of the day.
And I was so tired. So mornings weren't conducive for me to get any kind of personal work done. I think I was so, like, I felt like I had no control over when my kids woke up. So if the kids wake up at 6 or if they wake up at 8, like, there was no real routine. And I know some households have a real routine and maybe that's more conducive to early morning creativity, but that certainly wasn't my case. But I had a bedtime. We had a very established bedtime. So I knew what my evenings could look like. If I know what time supper's at, then I know what my window is before bedtime. then I can still do a bedtime routine and still have some hours at night if I need more. So it was just better for me at that stage of life.
And so did you end up continuing that throughout the process? And I was actually going to ask about your family's reaction to all this, having seen you start with this really focused spurt and then kind of going through the ups and downs until finally publishing your book. How much did you involve them in what was going on, and what was that like?
Well, I think I talked about it a lot, and like I would just speak out loud about some things I was struggling with, and I don't know that they really got it, but I was visibly working on it. So they saw my dedication. They heard me talk about, like, they knew this was really important, and they all came to my book launch, which was really, really fun. And I really felt their pride in what I was doing, because, like, to them, I'm just mom, but then they got to see me in a packed space. Like, it was standing room only. I had a really great book launch, and I'm up on the stage talking to people. They've never seen me being that person. And I think that was really exciting. And so my launch was in 2017. My middle son just turned 18. He still has my book launch poster on his bedroom wall, which is my favorite thing, like my favorite response ever. And that just really goes to show that it really meant something to my kids, that they were part of that whole journey, which is really exciting.
Not only did you launch this book, and now you're working on another book, which is coming out relatively soon.
Yeah.
You've evolved as a creative, as an entrepreneur, supporting other writers, having a creative business. What has your family's reaction to that been like? And how has the evolving process of work-life balance gone? I guess that's two different questions, but they feel very, very related.
Yeah, my family has been amazingly supportive, and I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was, because I think as women especially, we sometimes undervalue our contribution to the family or to the world as a whole. And so when I told my husband, I think I want to leave my job and do this full time, because I was working outside of the home. And he was like, all right, just like, can you do it? Can you replace your income? And I was like, I think so. And that was kind of the whole conversation. That's all he needed from me. And he just trusted that I was telling the truth, that I could actually make this thing work. So, I don't remember it being a big thing with the kids. They were just like, all right, well, mom's going to do what she does. And I think what that change showed was I was working so hard, because I was running my publishing business as kind of a side hustle. So my evenings were just gone. Evenings, weekends, all my free time was tied up in my little side business, and then days I'm going to work. So I was spread so thin, and I feel like my family probably didn't see a lot of me. And like, even though I was working on my business in the house, I'm still distracted from family life, right? Once I left my job and started working full time for myself, I was really intentional about creating boundaries around that work. And so I'm like 8 a.m. to 4 or 5 on a weekday, Monday to Friday. So my evenings are focused on my family, And weekends, I try really, really hard, and it is a struggle, but I try to keep my weekends free, whether we have family plans together or not. If I'm just home and available, present, not in the business. So that switch has been really, I think, really healthy, and kind of reminded me what it's like to just be a human, just to have some space. And now I really try and protect that space.
How do you navigate events and calls? And, it feels like there are so many weekend things that are creativity focused and arts focused.
Yeah.
And if you are a creative entrepreneur, it can be tough to navigate.
Yeah. So things like calls, I will only book calls Tuesday to Friday. I have a no meeting Monday policy. So Mondays are kind of focused on mapping out my week, trying to get a jump start on any major projects. No meetings, no calls, leave me alone. And then I'll do Zooms or phone calls if it's required by anyone I'm working with, Tuesday to Thursday. Thursday evening is the only evening that I've opened up for calls. So because I'm working with people who have full-time jobs, so maybe they can't have a Zoom meeting on a Tuesday afternoon. So I will do that Thursdays if necessary. And then there are no meetings on the weekend. I don't think I've ever broken that rule. But I have had events, certainly. And you just kind of, you roll with that. It's like anything in life, right? Like if you plan a trip to the city, that's going to take away your weekend. I just try and space those events out so that I'm not having one month that's really, really heavy. And then if I'm just at home, if we have no plans, that's the hardest thing for me, because work is right there and there's always deadlines. There's never a shortage of stuff I should be working on. Now, I am very lucky that I have a space that is outside my house. It's on my property, but I have to physically leave the house to go to work. So if I don't bring my laptop into the house at the end of the day, that's an easier boundary to keep. So if I get up on a Saturday morning, my laptop isn't there, and I don't have work email on my phone. So that's an important boundary that I have set. So I can't check work email. So I am off the grid, basically, to any of my authors. And I have to occupy myself in other ways around the home. And sometimes that just means I'm sitting down with a book, or often I'll put on an audiobook and I'll do a puzzle or something so that I'm not thinking about work. My kids are older, so sometimes they're off at work, and I'm not in that heavy parenting place anymore. So I don't have that kind of responsibility, but I think it is so important to guard that extra time. Otherwise, we're working 24/7. You can't sustain that.
And does that apply to your creative work, to your own writing as well? Or do you sort of separate out Chicken House Press you? And I mean, we started talking about how in the podcast it all fits together, but in terms of how you set these boundaries for yourself, if you feel inspired, do you say, well, inspiration, you're going to have to wait because I do not have my laptop inside right now?
No, I will not squash my own creativity. So I do think of that kind of outside, because that's not work. That's joy. That's feeding something else inside of me. So if it strikes, I'll write on the weekend. I feel like that's something totally different. But one of the things that I discovered when I went into my own business full time was that I had no concept of time budget or how long things really take, because they always take longer than you think. So I had this really beautiful idea that I was going to work Monday to Thursday, and then Friday would be my writing day, that it's just my time to focus on my stuff. And of course that was a lie. There's no way that that happened. And so there was like the first year and a half maybe of running my business full time, I didn't make space for myself. And it got to a point where I had enough. I feel like I was on the cusp of burnout because all my focus was on other people's projects. And I was starting to feel some resentment. So I had to kind of switch my thinking into considering myself as my own client. And that way, it kind of gave me permission to put me into my calendar. And you talked about morning pages. So at this stage in my life, I am now able to, the first thing I do when I come into the office is write. So that no matter what happens in my day, I've at least served myself a little bit and given a little bit of space. And that has been really, really, really good for me and healthy and honoring of what I needed and what the original dream was kind of that freedom to explore my own creativity while also supporting others. So that's kind of been life-changing.
Do you write specific to a project you're working on, or do you make a policy of free writing without expectation, or do you have a format for that first writing that you do?
Right now, it's really focused on the book. I'm working on a series right now. So that's where the energy is all kind of flowing. And I find even if I feel like I don't have any ideas, if I just start, because I've now trained my brain that this is your space, it catches up. It happens. And I mean, it's not always great writing, but at least it's progress no matter what. And it's something I can go back and fix later. But recently, it's all been within that world of that book series that I'm working on.
I've found that morning writing, I've still gained valuable things from doing it. But when I tried to do like the morning pages format, which for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, it's 3 pages. I think it's supposed to be either somewhat first thing in the morning, maybe as soon as you wake up, actually, but maybe there's some flex in that. I don't remember that part of it. I think maybe it's supposed to be by hand, but you're basically supposed to write without thinking, don't stop, which that in and of itself, I am a pause and write kind of person. At times I realize it's really hard to not stop. But I found that if I had a project that I was quote unquote like actually working on, I would get so mad about having to write morning pages about nothing when I had something that I actually wanted to work on. And it was not working for me. Like again, it was still a valuable learning process to see what I did write about, to see where my thinking was, what I think it also might depend on what kind of thinker you are. Because some people say, well, if you can't think of anything, you just write, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything. But I'm thinking more things than I can't write that fast, So it was a very interesting experience realizing, okay, maybe what's important here is to give myself permission to just work on the project versus maybe that total freedom is for when I need help getting to the place of having direction and having a project. But once you kind of have that river that's flowing or that momentum, you can sort of step into that. And you talked about training your brain and that your brain knows what to expect somewhat out of this routine, but also from you as a writer. Are there other ways that you've trained your brain or guidelines, rules, boundaries you've set for yourself that you've found helpful?
I think setting a timer has been really great for me because, the theory that work expands to fill the time that it's given. So if I don't set deadlines, like for my book, I want to finish my draft by this date. I want to be done beta readers by this date. Like if I don't have those set, it will be like I'll be in my 60s. It's not going to happen. So I set a timer for 30 minutes every morning, and that's my bare minimum writing. And because my brain knows we need to be productive in this 30 minutes, it usually shows up, which is really helpful. And I also publicize my deadlines that I set for myself, which is part of what the podcast is doing is I was saying, here's my word count goal. Here's where I'm at. Here's how far I have to go. So being loud about the things that I'm doing really helps me. And I know some creatives are I'm very introverted, but they're very like, hold it very close and don't share what they're doing. They don't want to give any spoilers. They just hold it very close to their chest. I find that the opposite works better for me. I'm trying to be really, look what I'm doing. I'm doing the thing. Because there's something about people knowing and then being able to check in with you. Because I'll get random messages like, so how are you doing on that goal? Which is actually really motivating because I want to be able to say, well, actually, it's going really great. And I am showing up every day and I'm doing the thing. And there is going to be a book. I don't know if I answered your question.
that making accountability public is a big thing. It can be scary just to do that, to do that part of it, especially if you've had to revise deadlines in the past. I'll say revise, or if you've started projects and dropped them, which I think we all have for something, right? Or changed it. It can be tricky, but also I think people who are with you in that accountability journey understand that things can change. And it's always scarier to us as the creatives to change our timelines than it is to the people listening to us.
Yeah. And I think generally people have a lot of grace and appreciate that vulnerability of I've been really wanting to do this thing, but here's how it all fell apart. Like people like to see the kind of the gritty underbelly of what will end up being a beautiful book. But if they feel like they're part of the journey, I think that that's actually really special on the other end, because maybe they'll read a scene in my book and they'll go, oh, I remember when she was really struggling with this and she asked this question in the Facebook group. And I think that that's really exciting. Like I wish there were more authors, like the authors that I love. I wish they were more present and open about their journey, because I feel like that would have helped me. But I'm here doing it for others so they can see that it's not a romantic, easy, smooth road. There's so many things to navigate. And by sharing that, I feel like in the end, I'm not just going to be giving them a book. I'm giving them a whole experience.
That's beautiful. And I was thinking back to your blogging days and how I'm sure that informed that, especially blogging being tied into like your personal reflection as a parent to begin with, so to speak. And I'm wondering if there are other aspects of your parenting journey that you feel thread into how you support yourself as a creative, but perhaps how you support other creatives. You also lead writing workshops. You approach developing creativity in yourself, but also in others.
One of the first things that my husband and I decided, even before we had children, was that we will never put our kids in programs that they aren't interested in. So rather than look at our baby and say, you're going to be a soccer player, we allowed our kids to grow into themselves and tell us what they wanted, what really sparked something in them. And I think that allowing that space made life more about discovery than anything else. And when they chose things that they were excited about, they could go in kind of with passion and excitement, and it would really light them up, and they weren't bogged down by all the other activities that we thought this is who you are. So I think approaching my own creativity in that way, like this is what lights me up. So I'm going to start saying no to all the things that I've been saying yes to that aren't really feeding who I am as a person. And I think that changes everything. Saying no to the things that aren't feeding you. And I think we saw our kids thrive in the things that they just really loved. And they are not things that I love. It's like, my son, my oldest, is such a nerd, and like Pokemon and computer. He just graduated university with his Bachelor of Computer Science. So it's like ahead for math. And so he was in the computer club and like all these things that I would have never, ever imagined for him, but he's just thriving. So we could have tried and pushed him into sports. Like I know my husband wanted basketball players, but you can't force. Like it just would have been a disaster. So we talked to other parents who they're complaining about how busy they are with their kids in like ball and dance and art and music and all the things. I think if we choose one thing we're really passionate about and pour into that, life is so much richer.
Beautiful. Who do you look towards for inspiration and for guidance, either as a parent or as a creative or both?
Oh, I feel like that's a big question. This feels awful, but I really feel like listening to myself, to like the little childhood Alanna that's sitting inside me that just wants to make a mark in the world and making space for her. I think that that's really valuable. And then of course there are, like Elizabeth Gilbert, she wrote Big Magic. I will promote that book forever and ever. I think that it's so valuable to creatives. I do find a lot of inspiration from other creatives who are sharing their creative journey. So like if you were to look on my Instagram feed, you would see a lot of people who are just encouraging creatives to lean in, to do the thing, to show up. So much of the message is show up. And sometimes you need to hear that message every day. Even if you know it, you don't always know it, right? You feel like you've bought in, but it's still easy to ignore. So making sure that that's kind of constantly pouring into me is actually really helpful.
No, that really resonates with me. The idea of it being easy to ignore. I think we'll have, especially, I'm interrupting myself here, but especially because as creatives, we do have so many ideas we have to ignore some of them sometimes. Like there's some wisdom to strategically not ignoring, but like putting in a place to hold on to.
Yes.
to marinating and keeping safe some ideas for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Distraction is a thing, but there are those little inklings, those little voices, those little phrases we hear, those little stirrings, and it takes an attention to nurture that and to create space for that, as you were saying, and that even if we have the identity of a creative and we have our creative discipline practices and we have goals, it still requires an attention to that little glimmer of possibility that comes up, as well as through the structure, but also, at other moments, so that we can listen to. I love how you were talking about listening to a past version of ourselves, or our inner knowing, or the magic that arises, however we want to put that. Because I know I've certainly thought, oh, I'll write that down later. And when I don't follow that little glimmer, it's a different thing, or it doesn't happen at all.
Yeah. And it's so easy to fall apart, right? So easy to fall aside. Like if you take one day where you're like, oh, I just need to rest today. It's hard to pick it back up the next day. So without that intention, it's why so many people don't write the book, why they don't finish the album, or why they don't do the painting. Like, because it's so much easier not to do it.
We are creatures that want to conserve energy, which is important, but it's very easy to let the days slip by, and let the minutes slip by, the hours, the days, the weeks, and have that accumulate. And it can take a surprisingly small amount of time to follow that spark in little ways. You mentioned a timer for 30 minutes. And I think that, well, I'd be very curious if you're listening. I'd be curious if you find that a big amount or a small amount. Sometimes if I do free writing exercises with people, right, I'll get them to write for a certain amount of time. That might be 1 minute, that might be 10 minutes. And then to reflect upon whether it felt like a long time or a short time. And it's a pretty amazing how much we can get out in a relatively short period of time, and what 30 minutes can feel like, what 30 minutes can produce, what 3 minutes can produce or can feel like, if we're making notes or just getting the ball rolling with something, maybe putting it in our schedule for later. So to finish up, you sort of answered this already, but maybe something else will come to you. What's one piece of parenting advice that you wish you had?
Oh boy. I think there's probably so much. I think that no one else knows your kids. And sometimes the best thing for your kids is for you to be the best version of yourself. And I think in the early days of parenting for me, I was just trying to survive. Like, you're just trying to make sure you get enough sleep. You have to keep these tiny humans alive. It's overwhelming. It's often lonely. And it's really easy to lose yourself. But I think parenting really lit up for me when I did start taking care of myself, in the sense of making space for my need to be creative. And my kids have since thanked me for setting an example of someone who chases after the thing they want. So they've recognized the difference in how I show up in the world, because I'm taking care of that part of me. And it is my hope that they carry that on into their adulthood, and that they're able to lean into the things that their spirit needs. And yeah, so I think if someone had just told me right from the beginning, don't lose yourself, I probably wouldn't have known what that meant. But you're so much more than a parent. And like, parenting is such an important role, but you can't do your best at that if you're not doing your best as yourself. You have to take care of yourself first. Love yourself first before you can really care for those around you.
Well, what a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So for those listening, where can they find you? What can they expect coming up from you, and what can they receive?
So you can find me at chickenhousepress.ca, which is my publishing business. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get kind of entered into this welcome sequence where you'll get to know me a little better. You'll also get a PDF download that's going to walk you through whether you're actually ready to be published. So if you're at a stage in your life where you're looking for that kind of support, or you're ready to put your book out in the world, maybe that will help you navigate that a little bit. And of course, you can see all the authors and books that I've been working on. If you want to kind of dig into me as a person a little bit more, Instagram at Alanna Rusnak. I do try and share a bit of kind of behind the scenes, what it's like to be working with authors, what it's like to be a writer while also supporting authors. Like, I do try and be real and vulnerable on there. So if you like stories on Instagram, that's where you can find me. And I do have a novel currently, When the Trees All Burned. It's part of a series that is called The Path That Takes Us Home. So it's kind of a apocalyptic, literary, a little dystopian. Like I haven't quite figured out where to put it in the market right now. But that very soon, information on that is going to be available on my brand new author website, alannarusnak.ca. So you'll be able to find everything you need to know about that. And I'm aiming for an April release for that one. I'm very excited. It's currently with beta readers. So I'm waiting for their feedback to do the next round of edits. And then, that's kind of the big project right now.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
And we'll put the links to everything in the show notes. Any last thoughts or requests for the listeners?
I just think, like, just be who you're meant to be on this world and don't be afraid to take up space. Just do the thing. Whatever creative spark is in you, chase after it, and who knows what it'll look like. I think if I hadn't started a blog, I don't imagine I'd be where I am now doing the work that I'm doing. So just try whatever that looks like. Yeah. Claim your space.
Beautiful. And I think that relates to as a parent as well, because I think in today's world, we have so many creative choices about being a parent. There are so many choices we can make. Some more than others. Certainly privilege plays a big role in that too, but there's so many choices we can make day to day about how we parent and who we are and how we are in relation to our children. And so I think the idea of being that spark, whether in our personal lives or in our professional, hopefully in all of our lives, hopefully in our one big, beautiful life, but with all the different elements of who we are, I think that's so important to remember. Thank you so much for tuning in. What resonated with you in today's episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and enjoy our back catalog of great episodes at laurenbest.substack.com. To find out more about today's guest, check out the links in the description. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep exploring.